This Friday we will not meet, and next Friday we will not meet. This Friday is the Three Kayas retreat, which for us starts on Thursday night, then all day Friday, all day Saturday, and then ends on Sunday. Which also reminds me, Nathan, please send out a message that Medicine Buddha teachings will not occur this Thursday or next Thursday, actually. This Thursday is the start of the Three Kayas retreat. Next Thursday is the start of the Manipa Mehong retreat that I'm doing through Southern Dharma Retreat Center. That's next Thursday. And that retreat too, I think if you are able to participate, you can still sign up for that. That retreat is on the surface, or the particular method used is the chant of Om Mani Padme Hum. But then using that, I'm going to emphasize practices in cultivating love and compassion. The Brahma Viharas, the divine abidings, or in the Mahayana tradition, we call the immeasurable minds. And that is going to go from Thursday, like the Three Kayas retreat. In fact, it will be Thursday evening and ending on Sunday. That's next weekend. Yeah? This weekend is the Three Kayas. So every weekend, there's some intensive to do. Retreat is a misnomer. These are intensives, not retreat. So, Statement 7 of chapter 2. People claim that the different measures and forms of appearance of the realms of the world were taught with certainty. So this claim, right? What it means is that, many Buddhists understand all the measures and forms of appearance of the realms of the world. How the Buddha described them in the text, in the scriptures, definitely is how it is. Yeah. So here, Kyopa Rinpoche rather daringly says, no, that's a very crude understanding. That's a very crude understanding. Of course, if you say that, I think people will say, what? How dare you doubt what the Buddha taught? Kyopa Rinpoche is not doubting what the Buddha taught. Kyopa Rinpoche is saying, due to the dispositions of the minds that perceive what they perceive, the appearances too are different. Due to the dispositions of the minds, the appearances too are different. So the way the Buddha talked about the 6 realms of existence to his audience, and the way he might talk to us today, it depends on, how we perceive our appearances, how appearances arise for us. So sometimes you've heard me joke, I said, Buddha tells us, the precious human life is the most precious of all lives, because it has the great capacity of becoming awake. And therefore, now that we have the precious human life with all the endowments and the leisures, we should not squander this away. And then I said, sort of joking, but not joking. And I don't know sometimes how people hear this. I said, maybe if the Buddha was teaching geckos He would praise all the qualities of being born as a gecko, how you cannot get another precious existence as a gecko. Being a gecko is the direct path to, Buddhahood. Quite possibly, he's saying that to the geckos. And I think the statement is making that point, Sometimes, again, I think we become so dogmatic and lost, the more essential understanding. So these others want to say, he taught them, right? He taught all these things, and he taught with certainty, as in, this is certainly how it is. Now, at this point, before we look at the commentary, for those of you who remember this or joined the class, at that point, or already at that point, there was another statement, we looked at that says, if it is not like that, merely looking at it that way is not going to make it so. Remember something like that? A statement like that? Yeah. So you could, bring this to and say, okay, now, how do they talk to each other? Right? Again, on the surface, it might seem like they disagree. But actually, it's not that they disagree. That point about if it is not so, merely wanting it like that, thinking it to be like that, is not going to make it so. There it is in the context of virtuous and non-virtuous, skillful and unskillful actions and the results of those actions. Meaning you cannot, create a negative cause, a cause of suffering. And just because you want happiness to ensue, it is not going to come that way. And over here, this statement is talking about, insofar as when we talk about the way we experience what we experience, be aware that your mind, your background, your upbringing, let's just put it in very common terms that we can all agree on, even if you don't yet, fully accept or appreciate, past lives. Just the past in this life, where you were born, how you grew up, how you were educated, how your parents taught you to eat or not to eat. All of that colors the way appearances appear to us. Okay, so the commentary, it is nothing but a very great impurity, meaning a fault, to understand the teachings on the sizes, forms, and so on of the 4 continents and Mount Meru as represented. For example, in the Abhidharma, Kalachakra, Avatamsaka, and so on as contradictions. So even within the Buddhist material itself, when you read the Abhidharma texts, they describe, the physical universe in this or that term. And then if you read the Kalachakra, another major system, and they have another description. And then if you read the Avatamsaka, it has another description. If you read the Vinaya collection, it has another description. In many places, they agree. In many other places, they seem to be talking about describing things differently. So here specifically, Chudra uses this statement to address the issue of why are they different? He says they're different not because the Buddha was contradicting himself. It is similarly wrong to divide the Buddha's instructions into sections with contradictions between them by adhering to a truth that claims, quote, the individual measures of understanding of which of the 6 kinds of beings with minor, mediocre, or supreme faculties are like that. Or, quote, the measures of appearances are like that, quote, unquote. or quote, my view is true, unquote, and the ways of others are not, unquote. Yeah. So this is basically that attitude of like, I'm right, they are wrong. Yeah. And so being stuck, being dogmatic, being fundamentalist about these descriptions. It is like the example of the same essence, such as water, that is seen by gods as nectar, by people as water, and by hungry ghosts as pus and blood. This is a very famous example. They say, this example says, to fish, water, there's no concept of water. It's just the world. Beyond that, there's no concept of water. Oh, you use that to wash things. You use that to do this and to do that. It's just the world, to fish. To human beings, it's water or river, right? Fishing and swimming and those concepts. And also to birds, maybe no concept of fishing. No concept of swimming. It's just how you move about. Then it's said to the gods, they perceive it as nectar and experience it as nectar. Then to hungry ghosts, even though they crave water, but all they see is pus and blood when they look at a river. Moreover, it is the appearance of things as different in the deluded eyes of surface level truth by the power of individual karma, character, inclination, and motivation, even though they are not at all established from the perspective of the truly established ultimate truth and emptiness. And so all these characteristics are established through our karma, our character, our inclination, our motivation, all those factors. And if those factors are not there, then the experience will not be there. So in this way, like with the previous statement, if it is not so, merely seeing it that way is not going to make it so. What is it is if it is not so? If all the causes and conditions are not there. So if you don't have the causes of conditions, right, of being a hungry ghost, merely looking at a river and going, oh, this is pus and blood, this is pus and blood, is not going to make it pus and blood. Oh, this is nectar, this is nectar. It's not going to make it so. Causes and conditions have to be present. The Vajrapanjara Tantra, a Hevajra cycle of Tantra, the particulars of the objects and senses do not have different forms. The appearing of form and so forth is the appearance of one's mind alone. So our perception changes. Pamodrupa says, so this is, remember the context, right? Earlier statements talks about the momentary nature of phenomena, of experiences, and therefore we can be very trapped or we can be very free, right? Even just within one moment. Never think, the suffering is so great that it cannot be overcome. Never think that this happiness is so great that it will not disappear. Pamodrupa says, through the vital point that the appearances of mind, which is free from proliferation, are, from the hell realms up to Buddhahood, emptiness, they can turn into anything. Yeah, so they can turn into anything. Now, of course, we will footnote there and say, but Kyopa Rinpoche reminds us, the turning into everything also depends on causes and conditions. Yeah. Don't just have wishful thinking as your causes and conditions. Wishful thinking is not enough causes and conditions. Yeah. Wishful thinking of partying the night before is not enough to prevent a hangover the next morning. That's just wishful thinking. That is not, can turn into anything of Pamodrupa. In short, all phenomena within samsara and nirvana are not established as being other than the mind. Again, the Vajrapanjara Tantra says, visible form, feeling, apperception, mental formation, and consciousness. This is the 5 skandhas. Apperception, that is Sobhish's preference for perception or sensation. So form, feeling, perception or apperception, mental formation, and consciousness are all born from the mind alone. The sage never taught anything else. The Muni, Shakyamuni, never taught anything else. If you thus realize everything as nothing but the mind, even quote samsara and nirvana unquote are mere words and empty. The Anavila Tantra says, there is no transmigrating within samsara. There is no wandering within samsara. And there is no entering into nirvana. Samsara and nirvana are in truth empty, like the reflection of the moon upon the water. Reflection of moon on water. From the perspective of not having thus realized appearance, samsara and nirvana appear as different. The reason is the following, as it is said, who made the ground of burning iron? This is from Shantideva. And where did those demonic women of the hells come from? The Muni declared that all such things are just projections from your evil mind. Moreover, Lord Pamadrupa also intended this meaning by saying that sometimes this valley of Ngamshu is Akanishta, and sometimes it is the ground of burning iron. Very famous saying of Pamadrupa. He says, sometimes this valley of Ngamshu, where he was teaching, is Akanishta, like the highest realm of form existence, where Buddha is said to, the Sambhogakaya, Supreme Sambhogakaya is said to reside. But sometimes it is the ground of burning iron, which is the hell realms. It is like this because although phenomena appear differently according to the perspective of people with minor, medium, and supreme accumulation of merit, in truth, their essence is not established. Meaning, in truth, there is no essence to either Akanishta, Ngamsho, or hell realms. This morning in Western North Carolina, in Asheville, it's such a beautiful morning. It's bright and clear. The very first signs of autumn has arrived. Air is crisp, clean, cooling, just the right temperature, I have my windows open. I hear squirrels, I hear birds, I hear chirping, So this is, how we imagine Akanishta or Devachen or the Pure Land of Amitabha, And these are the moments where, Asheville, sometimes, these mountains of Asheville is Akanishta. And sometimes it is the ground of burning iron. Examples include the cave of 18 cubits that has room for a Chakravartin along with his sons, his queen, and his troops. The size of the throne prepared by Maitreya mentioned in the Manjushri Buddhashetra Sutra, and the qualities of the Vajra Peak mountain in the Tri Samvara Nidresha Parivarta Sutra, which nowadays do not exist on the Vajra Peak mountain. So these are references to all the different miraculous, magical locations mentioned in the sutras. Similarly, the ways in which the appearances of the different minds arise, are different. Furthermore, some people say the snow mountain, which is taught in the glorious Kalachakra and in the basic text of the Abhidharma, as the place of the golden canopy and rose apple trees where Indra's elephants dwell, is not Mount Kailash and so forth. In the Tantra, it is prohibited that people who do not possess realization should go to those places. Here, Chodra is quoting, or not exactly quoting, but paraphrasing Sakya Pandita's objections. In one of Sakya Pandita's writings, basically his main work that criticizes a lot of what Sakya Pandita thinks Kyopa Rinpoche is saying in his very famous call, Clear Differentiation of the Three Vows, which I've read a couple of times, not that long. Well, it's all relative, long or short. And I remember, like I read them. I read it before I had access to Gongchik. And I read it also after I have access to the Gongchik. And I got a lot out of it, even though it was, criticizing what he thinks Gongchik is saying. So I got a lot out of the clear differentiation of the three vows. So there, the style already very different, The title already tell you he wants to clearly draw lines between the three vows. And then the title of our text is The Single Intention, which is not about drawing lines. Yeah. Anyway, there in one section, Sakya Pandita criticized the practice of going on pilgrimage, especially on pilgrimage to tantric sites. So that's what he means here, in the glorious Kalachakra and the Abhidharma, when it describes these places, it is not as you people say, oh, it's Mount Kailash, oh, it's this place, oh, it's that place, and then so Sakya Pandita raises basically two objections to the popular practice of identifying certain locations, certain places as the places mentioned in this sutra or that tantra. So he places two objections. One objection is he's criticizing the Tibetans. He says, you Tibetans identify Tibetan locations and say, oh, this is what the Tantra calls the snow mountain. This is what the Tantra calls, this or that. So he says, first, geographically, you guys got it wrong. These are places in India. So you got it wrong. So that's his first objection. His second objection, maybe a more important objection, he says, and even if you were in India and you try to go to these places, you are not supposed to go there because you are not ready. It says, according to these tantras, these places are powerful places. And if you have not yet unblocked and opened the powerful places within your energetic body, within your Vajra body, within your psychic body, Then if you go to these places, at best, it's a waste of effort. At worst, it will harm you. Okay? He says, because the guardians of those places, the darkest dakinis, will be upset that you intruded. He said that. So he objected on these two grounds. One, you guys should study better geography. Pay attention in geography class. It's not where you guys say it is. And so, for example, Kailash, Lapchi, and Tsari, these places are said to be the body, speech, and mind mandala of Chakasamvara. Sakya Pandita says, this is all nonsense. Now maybe Kailash he would accept, but the others he would say, no, this is all nonsense. Not only that, Tibetans will say, oh, the copper-colored mountain of Guru Rinpoche is over here, or Pemako, this hidden lands, in Tibet, is this holy land, is this mandala of Manjushri, and this and that. And Sakya Pandita said, no. All these places are in India. You guys just made it up for commercial purposes, to sell trinkets to pilgrims. There's some validity to that criticism. So this is what Choda is referencing. So he raises the objection that Sakya Pandita raised. Thus they say that it is prohibited for many reasons. And then Choda goes, talk only after analyzing. So he's objecting to Sakya Pandita and say, these people who don't, think carefully before they speak. So then Choda quotes Vimalakirti Sutra. The Venerable Shariputra said, I see that this great world is filled with high and low mountains, abysses, and filth. The Brahmin Rinpoche, who came from the Buddha land of Buddha Ashoka, said, I see that this field of the exalted Shakyamuni Buddha is as pure as the perfect arrays of the Parinirmitta realm of gods. So this is an episode in the Vimalakirti Sutra where Shariputra said, oh, Buddha, this world that we are in, it's just yucky, But then during that teaching, there was a being that came from another world system, from the world of Buddha Ashoka. And he looked around, he said, oh my gosh, Buddha Shakyamuni's world is so amazing. Elsewhere, there's another story like that, where one of Buddha's disciple, maybe Ananda, maybe Shariputra, one day said to the Buddha, how come you tell us the wonders of this Buddha in that pure land, and that Buddha in that pure land, and this pure land and that pure land? How come where we are, it's not like that, Then it's, and this story comes from the longer part of the story is that this is after Buddha and his disciples came to this area, and the people were not friendly to them, and there was no food. And so for a couple of days, they have not eaten. And finally, they came up to this guy with a stable and horses. And so they went up to him and asked, to see if he has food. And the guy said, I don't have any food, but I have horse feed. If you want, I'll give you some. So the Buddha said, okay, no choice. Told the disciples, let's be grateful, accept this horse feed. And so then they walked away from the stable and sat down under a tree to eat. And, Shariputra or Ananda lost it at that point and said, basically saying, why are we stuck with you, in this world? And we keep hearing you telling us about Amitabha's world is so fantastic, Ashobhya's world is so fantastic, what's the deal, It said that the Buddha at that point said, the Buddha answered by, like he touched his toe onto the ground, and then from the point where his toe touched the ground, rays of golden light swept out, and kind of like unveiled this world. And then it's like it's described in the Buddha lands of this Buddha and that Buddha. And then the Buddha reached into his own begging bowl and took like one mouthful and said to, the monk who complained and said, here, have a taste. And he ate it, and it's like the best thing he ever ate. And then the Buddha said, this is my food. This is my world. I don't know about you. So this is the story, similar to Vimalakirti here. Then, because the Exalted One revealed the name of this Buddha field to the assembly of retinues, everyone saw it as completely pure as the arrangement of jewels Buddha field of the precious Buddha of the eastern direction. Thus, at that time, the Exalted One proclaimed, my Buddha field is always like this, but you do not perceive it. So then Chodra says, it follows that the Manasarovar lake, which is the lake facing Mount Kailash, Tise, which is Kailash in Tibetan, Tsari, and so forth, do not look today as they were previously described, which is also understood in just the same way. I said, so these places do not look like that, and you do not experience it like that, not because they are not, but because due to our own karmic propensities, we don't see it like that. However, some say that even the Voucher Peak Mountain is not today as it is taught in the Ratnakutra Sutra. Due to the passage of time, every place appears in a changed form. Listen as I will clarify and explain. How can all these be confused? So this is again quoting Sakya Pandita. Dhammakirti, Chodra says, you may argue with poetic praises and expressions of true reality, but the authoritative quotes from Sutra and Tantra destroy that completely. And he says, you could, use very nice words, logic, this and that, but, the quotes from the Sutra and Tantra will blow away all your, fancy words. However, you repeat in the glorious Kalachakra and in the basic text of the Abhidharma, unquote, Chodra says, however, your quotation of matching explanations of places in the Kalachakra and Abhidharma completely misses the mark. So he's saying, trying to match what is said in the Kalachakra to actual places that if 5 of us walk there and all 5 of us go, yeah, look, there's that. He says, that effort, completely misses the point. In other words, Chodra says, your literalism completely misses the point. There are some who are accepted as realized ones who have aversions, whose thoughts are even coarser than those of the lowliest householder. Furthermore, there are those who are accepted as scholars who in reality are attached to the illusion that holds one side is true and who pass their own judgment on the Buddha's words. Think about your own comparable situation. Be humble and remain quiet. Maybe Chodra was in a little kind of, unhappy day or whatever, when he wrote this commentary. Basically, he says, shut up. 187. This Sobitius. Oh, 186. Or that point where, somewhere in the middle of Sobitius' notes, he says, in the second part of Chodra's comments on this Vajra statement, the tone turns polemical. Yes. So he gets polemical, he gets argumentative. He even sort of, sarcasm, right? So it's okay. We can admit that. We can look at that and say, yeah, then he's turning a little, feisty and polemical. But don't think that it's only him. Okay, Sakya Pandita's clear differentiation is also that tone. In a way, you can say Sakya Pandita fired the first shot. He will say, these people, they will mistake the donkey's ass to be their father's face. Sakya Pandita said things like, uses expressions like that. These people, will like mistake the donkey's ass as their father's face. So maybe Chodra is not at all in a pissy mood, but maybe even playfully, you use that language, I'm going to use it back and reflect it back for you. He defends the Kagyu view of the identification of Mount Meru and holy places such as Lake Manasorowa, Mount Tise, and Mount Zari against the attacks of Sakya Pandita. Jigten Sungan had sent thousands of yogis to do retreats in these places. But Sakya Pandita stated in his clear differentiation that the snow mountain mentioned in the Kalachakra and the Abhidharma is not identical with Mount Kailash and the others. According to Sakya Pandita, people who have not already attained realization are prohibited from going to these places. Sapan argues that many descriptions in the Tantras and the other scriptures are rather, quote, eulogistic of attributes. In other words, they use metaphors and similes, calling a cow, quote, a fallen fragment of a cloud, unquote, or using the image of Mount Meru as an example of bulkiness. All these are exaggerations permitted to the poet. He continues that if a description is intended to match the actual condition, the facts should match today's description, with the exception of some slight changes due to the passage of time. And so you can see that, Sakya Pandita wants to be literal, and therefore will say, these descriptions at best, right? They are metaphorical to inspire something. On some level, very reasonable. In some ways, he here at least, in some ways, he's saying these are symbolic. Chodra's point, and ultimately Gyalpa Rinpoche's point, is more, you can say it's symbolic, but don't be so sure. The idea that it is symbolic, like something is symbolic, means what? If you say, this is symbolic, what does that statement implies already? Let's say we say, Vajrakilaya has 3 faces, 4 legs, and 6 hands. Often we say, oh, this is symbolic, right? But can you see what we are already, what is our basic premise when we say Vajrakilaya has three faces, or the fact that Vajrakhilaya has three faces, or the fact that, you know, the form of Avalokiteshvara has 1,000 heads and 1,000 hands is symbolic. It means da, 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 da. Like it's poetic. I say that too, you know, but no, when we say that, when I say that, what am I already kind of take for granted and not even question?
It's not a real, it's not a person that's being embodied. It's the idea of emptiness or
something even more basic. What have I already, how have I already shown my prejudice, my hand?
That it's not literally true, it represents something else. Kind of like we say the flag is symbolic of the United States. The flag is not the United States, it just stands for it. Represents an idea.
Yeah, but something else.
I think something symbolic has the perceiver as well as the thing. So there has to be, you know, when you say something symbolic, it implicates the perception side of things.
So when we say something is symbolic, like, you know, description of the Vajrakhilaya deity, what's the prejudice that we already assume? Of course, from our perspective, it's not prejudice, but to be objective, what is the prejudice I already assume? Yes, Antonio.
That they are in that form, that they have exactly 3 heads, 1,000 arms, whatever. But the 3 heads mean that they can look different in different directions, different senses, different worlds, different qualities, I don't know.
What prejudice have I already demonstrated when I say, oh, you know, the description of Vajrakhilaya having 3 faces, Avalokiteshvara having 1,000 heads, it's symbolic of blah, 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 blah.
Maybe just the prejudice to read meaning into things, like that, those things matter.
No, it has to be relevant to what we're talking about. I mean, everything you all said, you know, is correct, but relevant to what we're talking about. Y'all don't see it?
Maybe that the person you're talking to knows what faces and heads are. Also,
we're getting warmer, but and let me see. I can see something in the chat. No such thing as form. We're getting warmer.
Is it that it's not real?
Sort of warm. It's not even that, the problem is not even that it is not real. The problem is what I think is real.
I don't believe
I
it.
think having 1 head is real and having 3 heads is not real.
Okay.
That I even
you
need
also assume that we think that too.
What?
You also assume that we think that too then.
Yes.
That we all have the same idea of what a person looks like.
Yes. Yeah. And so this idea that, you know, like 1 head surely is true. 3 heads surely requires explanation. 2 hands obviously is true. 1,000 hands obviously needs explanation. Really? Right? So see how we fixate on one head, two hands, two legs, 10 fingers, 10 toes. Then any description that says, 21 toes, it's like, well, 21 is symbolic of ... Yes, of course, there are texts that will say 21 is symbolic of this, 3 heads is symbolic of that, right? I'm not denying that. But that more sneaky underlying assumption that our perception of reality surely is how reality is. That's the more subtle obscuration that is always lurking there. And we see this played out by people who I feel digest the wrong things when they superficially study the Dharma, where it says everything is mind only, right? Then they will think immediately, oh, Pure Land is just symbolic. Oh, Hell Realms is just symbolic. Everything is just symbolic, except for Asheville is not symbolic. My house is not symbolic. My car is not symbolic. My body is not symbolic. Whereas all of this is real. Oh, karma is just symbolic. Oh, making offerings is just symbolic. Oh, lighting lamps is just symbolic. So we have so committed to kind of a materially based, a sensory, verifiable base sense of reality. And even that sensory based sense of reality is skewed in such narrow ways. When we know the senses of bees and the senses of dogs in some areas surpass that of humans. But we're so committed to our sensory experiences and immediately assume that's real. Everything else are pale versions of the real that I know to be, must be real. Gendin Chöpel, one of the last century's Tibetan intellectual, he was one of the first Tibetans, or in modern times, that ventured out of Tibet and then arrived in Kolkata and then went to Sri Lanka. And he, a very sharp mind, he was from Eastern Tibet, Gelugpa in his formal education, but come from a Nyingma family. Was a monk at first, then later did not continue as a monk. But he went out into the modern world, so to say, and he hung out with intellectuals in Calcutta, which was a very, intellectually exciting place at that time in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so he was exposed to many ideas. And then he went to Sri Lanka and he saw, the Buddhist tradition there, and he was so impressed, by the simplicity of the monks, no thrones, no brocades, no palaces. And he was so impressed by that. But later he got disappointed because when the Sri Lankans, figured where he is from and started to insult his Buddhism, then he got a little, upset with them, But anyway, in one of his famous works, although people dispute whether he wrote it or not, it's called Ludrup Gongyen, Ornament of Nagarjuna's Intention. Wonderful, very refreshing. There he talks about, he said, one of the sections there, he said, I forgot what I was going to say. Ornament of Nagarjuna's intention, yeah, there's so many wonderful things in there, he said. No, I cannot remember. Yes, he said. There he is kind of critiquing the notion of the very important area of studies of Gelugpa seminaries, which is they spend a great amount of time basically studying what we would call logic, reasoning, the rules of logic, the rules of reasoning, and they say reasoning, valid reasoning is based on this and this and not this and not that, and and so then Gindinchubel said. He said, so they talk a lot about, he said, he said, we talk a lot about, now this is when he's starting to have questions already of the conventional categories that are being studied in the seminaries, in Tibetan seminaries, now that he's been exposed to outside views. And he said, we talk so much about how this is valid perception, this is invalid perception. Then he said, we talk about, how if you see it, that's valid perception. And he said, but, what we see, what we think we see, appears to be as such only because of the accidental fact, he says, that our eyes are laid out horizontal on our face. Have you thought of that? He says, you perceive the world in the way that you perceive only because, that our eyes are laid out on our face horizontally. He says, can you imagine waking up one day where the eyes are stacked vertically? And how your experience of the world, how you move around in the world will completely change. And yet, you hold on so firmly on, oh, the world is like this and like this and like this and like this and not like this, not like that. Another area he talked about, again, valid reasoning, or, and then he said, and so you guys like to say, my point is valid. Why? Because this is what Buddha said. So this is good, Gindinchubel, he said. And because, he says, he said, because the perfect Buddha has said so. And he goes, he's kind of like playing devil's advocate, right? He says, oh, you said, he says, it sounds so good, when you say, because the perfect Buddha has said so. And then he said, now, let me ask you this. How do you know the perfect Buddha has said so? And then he said, then you will say, well, the Buddhist tradition that we accept said the Buddha said so. And he said, oh, okay. How do you know the Buddhist tradition is reliable? And he said, well, my Lama say so. And he said, oh, Well, that sounds good too, you know. But how do you know your precious Lama is reliable? So what's the answer to that? What do you think the answer to that is? How was that decided?
By your idea of the law.
Yeah, you decided, he said. Yeah. So then he said, in the end, he's saying, the tiger is vouched by the deer is vouched by the rabbit, and the rabbit is vouched by the mouse. And the mouse is this confused mind of yours. And he said, and yet we proudly rattle on and on about, you know, valid perception, valid reasoning. And he said, didn't the Buddha, if you want to talk about the Buddha, didn't the Buddha said, you know, right now the mind is confused. Oh, so very good point, you know. His point is not that, you know, don't practice Buddhism or anything like that. No, he is. So if you're interested, go look up this text, Ludrup Gongyen, ornament of Nagarjuna's intention. It's in a book translated by Donald Lopez. I think it's called The Madman's Middle Way. The Madman's Middle Way. Yeah, so, you know, continue here. Choki Drapa argues that the differences in appearances for all beings are chiefly due to their karma. Here and in many Drigong writings, examples are provided of people having visions of a place in Tibet as being a Buddha field. For example, Pamudrupa said that he sometimes perceived the valley of Ngamsho as Akanishta. Jenga Sherab Jungne too had pure visions of this kind, in particular regarding Lake Manasarova and Mount Tise, Kailash. Both he and Jigten Sumgun saw the mountain of Drigong as the Vulture Peak Mountain, as explained in the Ratnakutra Sutra. Choki Drapa refers to the Vimalakirti Sutra and the perception of the Brahman Rapachen. He argues that these are pure visions of Buddha realms, where that which one perceives is neither a poetic exaggeration, nor has it changed over the course of time. So what this is saying is, you know, right where you are sitting, it could be Vulture Peak. Right where you are sitting, could be Mount Kailash. Right where you are sitting, can be Lapchi, can be Tsari, these holy places. And in fact, in Kyoba Rinpoche's Profound Dharma, insight there, in some instructions he gave, he specifically gave instructions on how, if for whatever reasons you are not able to literally go to Lapchi, one of these holy places, to do your retreat, then he says, here is the method for consecrating wherever you are and turning it into Lapchi. Those are very special instructions, but not that mysterious. He says you can think wherever you are is Lapchi, is the holy land of Lapchi. And when you start your practice, you start your retreat, he says it's advised that you go to the holy places for retreat, but then he says not always possible. And when that's not possible, then here is the way to think of wherever you are as Lapchi. And when you make the offering to the local protector, you offer it to the protector of Lapchi. And then that place becomes Lapchi and carries all the blessings of Lapchi. That is Gilbert Rinpoche's style or understanding based on this statement. So the implications of this statement is far-ranging. So today we will stop here. It's already 11 o'clock. Any questions or comments? I guess, what we have looked at that. I can take a few minutes. Yes.
I don't know if I understood well. A place could be a mandala because our karma, our perception, and also we can do a place as mandala for our actions.
Yes. Yes. You can transform your place into a holy place.
It's the instructions that you talk about.
Yeah.
And it has a relationship with the cleaning, with the all the practices.
Yeah, sure.
That
Different things, those are the different causes and conditions that we bring together. Then that place can be consecrated as like Lapchi, holy place. Lapchi is a holy place on the borders of Tibet and Nepal, where Milarepa especially practice Lapchi. So just one example, it could be Lapchi, it could be, and it could be Bodh Gaya. So you can consecrate your place, So in that teaching, Kyopa Rinpoche said, so whatever holy place that you feel, kind of like some sort of connection to, if you cannot physically go there, because he said you can still have the benefit of doing retreat there if you consecrate your surroundings as that place.
Thank you.
Yeah. And all the blessings that is described as belonging to that place can turn up wherever you are. Changju Samcho Rinpoche Ma Ge Ba Nam Ge Gyurchi Ge Ba Nyam Pa Me Pa Yang Gone Gondu Bewar Sho. Yeah, so again, Nathan, please send that email out about this Thursday and next Thursday. Then for those of you who still have to register for the 3 kayas, go ahead and register. As I said, this time, I don't think Zoom participation is limited because too many people want to. And so then it's good to sign up on Zoom. It's a little bit more connected. And Nathan just provided the sign up page. And then sometime this week, once we have the Zoom information from the organizers, this time Abhidharma is not hosting the Zoom, it's folks in Vietnam. Then we will send to all the people who have registered. And also the text for that practice we will send out. Yeah. Okay, Tata.